What is going on, guys? It's Everyday Spartan, and today I want to talk to you guys about ankle injuries in Spartan races. So ankle injuries are very common in Spartan races and trail running in general. They're probably the most common injury I've seen at a race, and they're also the most common injury that I have had during the race. I've had 3 ankle rolls throughout several Spartan races in total on my own. So I know a lot about these. I've done a lot of personal research, and so I wanted to kind of share with you guys some of the information I've gathered in one nice place for all the information you'll need to be able to continue racing for Spartan to the best of your ability. I want to put a disclaimer: I am not a medical professional in any way, and if you are having serious problems beyond what would normally be expected for a rolled ankle, I highly recommend you go seek the advice of a medical professional, not someone on YouTube. This is just some common knowledge, bits of advice that I've been able to find by professional runners, medical websites online, some running books, and things like that. Basically just technique, strength and conditioning that's going to help you prevent those ankle rolls. So I want to talk about, first of all, workouts that you can do preventing and rehabilitating an ankle. So if you've had an injury and it's been like over a week and you want to kind of get back into it, or if you just want to make sure you're preventing an injury, particularly if you're a new runner and you want to make sure you have strong ankles, I'll give you some good workouts for that. Then I'm going to talk about some gear you can get, particularly shoes, that are going to help you prevent rolled ankle injuries, and particularly things that I bought. And then finally, I'm going to talk about some technique that you can incorporate into your running style to help prevent these rolls. So before we get started, I just wanted to talk about exactly what is a rolled ankle. So rolled ankles, or ankle inversion sprains, are pretty much where you invert your ankle and you roll it outwards. This is the opposite of an eversion sprain, where you roll it inwards. But essentially what you're doing is you're hyperextending that ankle and you're tearing some of the supporting muscles and tendons, helping you with your balance and keeping you upright. So you can see how this can get injured in running, because obviously when you run, you use these ankle muscles a lot. So having a rolled ankle and having this injury can really prevent you from having ideal running form, technique, and performance. So obviously one of the first things you want to do is make sure you strengthen that ankle. So if you have had injuries in the past, strengthening that ankle can really help you out to get back to the level that you want to be at. And then also, if you just want to prevent it, you haven't had a roll yet, but you don't think you have particularly strong ankles, you want to do these workouts. So you engage your ankle a lot when you just balance on one foot. So I'm going to show you in these videos here. As you can see, pretty much all of these workouts that I do just involve me balancing on one foot, and I do a lot of stuff to shift my weight around. So you can see I do this one exercise where I balance on one foot and then I swing a foot forward and backwards, and I'll do that both ankles. And then I have another one where I'll swap from that and I will do my foot side to side on swings. And this is just another way, as you can tell, I'm just balancing on one foot and I'm shifting my body weight around so that I have to engage different parts of my ankle and different muscles in there to make sure I'm balancing and keeping myself stable and upright on my foot. If you have weak ankles, this is actually a lot harder than it looks. And then finally, I will do some jumping on one leg. So I will jump up on one leg and then land on that same one leg. Try to land in the same spot and balance. Again, really helps with me, landing on my foot, which again is a lot of time where these ankle injuries can happen, is while you're landing, and just particularly keeping that balance and stability in there. And those are all things that I will put in at the end of my workout. So if you want to do it just preventatively or lightly, I would do this at least like twice a week. But personally, I do this at the end of every single run I do. So I'll just go out for a nice run. This stuff does not take very long. You add 5 minutes to your workout to get these nice ankle strengthening techniques. And if you do this over months, you'll have very solid ankles without ever particularly working that ankle in any other way. And it can really go a long way to help preventing injuries in the future. Highly recommend that. I also have a warm-up technique that I will do before I do particularly technical runs, or before I do a race of any kind, like a Spartan, where I will just, again, go up on one foot and I will grab my other foot that I'm not balancing on and I will roll it just in circular pattern. So I'll do it clockwise and then I'll do it counterclockwise, maybe 10 times each, and then I will swap my foot. And doing this both times just helps you kind of warm that ankle up and get them used to being engaged and supporting your body weight on one foot. So that's some of the stuff that you can do. Just again, make sure you're doing proper warm-ups. At the end, do this strengthening. So moving on from those rehab techniques, I also want to talk about gear that you can get to help prevent injuries while you're out racing without having to do anything else. So again, the big thing is you want to have good support on that ankle. And I want to talk about some of my experience. I rolled my ankle in 3 different Spartan races, and in each time I was in this pair of shoe. So these are the Ultra Kings. As you can tell, look at how low that ankle support really is. It's basically nothing. And I pretty much just bought these shoes because I saw online that they were recommended, and I was like, oh, if they're good for professional runners, they're probably good for me. And that's totally wrong. I did not have the years of experience it requires to be adequate at trail running. I now know that for beginners, you really want to start off with a more moderate shoe that's going to give you better ankle support and better balance, and lead into something. These are also zero drop shoes, so they do nothing to support your foot from rolling inwards or outwards. These are probably, I imagine, great for professional trail runners because they are so light and they give you a lot of freedom about how you can place your foot, but they have that really low ankle and not a lot to do in your balance for your feet, and so that can cause newer runners to be injured wearing them. So the day after I had to pull out of my super, where I rolled it 4 miles in, and I eventually had to pull out, I decided I've had enough. I'm never gonna roll an ankle again. And I bought these. These are the Ultra Lone Peaks. And as you can tell, just look at the difference in the ankle height between these two shoes. So they kind of have a very similar front end, but look how much extra ankle support. Pretty much all of this right here is just to support your ankle and keep it from rolling. So again, this kind of looks like a boot. I've heard people call this the boot before. Again, you cannot undervalue how much this extra padding and pulling your ankles in tight can really help. I can think of 3 times during Spartan races where I was wearing this and my ankle started falling out, and I felt the extra pull in the shoe really helped me pull my foot in. And I think had I not been wearing these, I would have definitely rolled my ankle in those races too. So this alone I can attribute to helping me prevent rolls. This is great for newer runners. I will say it's a little heavier, but it's worth it. But you don't have to get like these particular brand or this particular shoe. These are expensive, so they may not be an option for some people. But pretty much how I got at these shoes is I went to just my local running store and I said, hey, I'm looking for trail shoes. I have a history of rolling ankles, and can you recommend anything for me to really have solid ankle support? And this is what they recommended. And going and talking to people where it's literally their job to help you find things to boost your running performance is a big plus. So make your way out to any running store if you have access to one and ask them for help. I will say I've eventually weaned myself off and gotten onto these. These are the Saucony Peregrines. These are also, you know, obviously they have a higher ankle than that first one, but they don't have that big boot-like thing. They also have a lot more balance in the middle, so this helps me stay a little bit more stable just by extra padding here in the middle. So these are what I train in now, but I've been able to slowly wean myself into this, but that's the importance of using those strengthening workouts. You want to make sure your ankles are stronger and then transition into wider shoes. And this kind of brings me to a topic I wanted to talk about, which is a lot of people don't want to wear these extra supportive shoes and stuff like that. And they also don't want to wear ankle braces because they feel like if they always wear those and they always run in those, then they will become dependent on them and they won't be able to not run in the shoe. They'll have to always wear like this high ankled shoe or this brace while they're running. But the problem is, whenever you roll your ankle, you are actively tearing that muscle. So aside from the damage you're doing immediately from the roll, if you continue running on that for the few weeks following that, you're still damaging it and you're gonna be down for quite a long time. Basically by the end, I can almost guarantee that your ankle is gonna be weaker after a roll than before, okay? So you have to take extra care. It's much better to not roll the ankle than to risk rolling it and get maybe a little stronger. The strength building is what those workouts that I mentioned earlier are for. You can do those to help build ankle strength and then still wear a brace. So the brace is so that you can practice your running, and then you can practice your ankle strength in particular afterwards, after you get done running with those drills, okay? So again, just really want to make sure you're preventing ankle injuries. And this always also brings me to talking about, if you don't want to wear those shoes, you can also get regular shoes and you can get an ankle brace. So I've run an ankle brace. What I did after the Charlotte race, for multiple races afterwards, is I ran in the boot, I ran in these Lone Peaks, and I had an ankle brace on under this. So it just slipped on over my sock and I was still able to slip my foot in there. And let me tell you, my ankle was always super solid. I never had an issue. Wearing it while I ran really helped give me the stability and confidence I needed to make sure I could continue running and performing the way I wanted. Aside from all that, you can also roll your ankle with either tape or ace bandages or something like that. You can just make sure you wrap it I'm gonna link in the description some websites that you can go to that you can look at to see the proper way to wrap your ankle if that's the route you wanna go with. So now that we've talked about the gear and the importance of wearing your gear, and we've all talked about strength and conditioning, the last thing to look at is your technique while you're running. So I wanna emphasize that every single time I've rolled an ankle, particularly, it has been going downhill. I've never rolled an ankle going uphill or even on flats, although I assume it's still very common to happen on flats. And if you rolled your ankle, you could probably agree that it either happened on a flat or downhill. And so focusing on your downhill technique can be really important. I learned running just under Mike. He kind of told me some things, but he never really looked at my running form for the first several months. And so I was kind of just figuring it out on my own by running. And I can tell you that I definitely did some bad techniques that led to this rolling on my ankle. So I want to share with you some information I've gotten by watching professional runners, listening to professional runners, and reading books about running, about some of the technique you should be doing in order to make sure that you are particularly having good structured ankle support. So I'm going to show you some clips of me just running so I can focus on a few things. But I'm going to focus all on my downhilling technique because I think that's probably what you need the most work on. So some of the rules I've learned about downhilling is you want to keep your hips directly above your feet. So this came as a bit of a surprise to me because when I was learning to run, I always learned that you want to let the hill kind of pull you down. So you want to fall along with the hill because then you're using less energy as you go down. But unfortunately, how I translated that is I leaned further down into the hill. So if you ever watched me when I was running back then, I would always be leaning way far forward and my hips would be ahead of where my feet are landing. So that causes me to land more on my toes. And when you land on your toes, it's very easy to roll off to the side because you have very little support on that particularly small toe side and roll off and roll that ankle. So landing a little bit more on your heels, particularly on going downhills where it's more impactful, is really good because it's keeping a lot of your weight closer to your center of mass, so you're having a lot better balance. And also the way you're landing on your foot is just going to be a little bit better because instead of the force being pushed outwards, it's going to be pushed upwards along your leg. So you're less likely to fall out and roll. So as you can see in the video, I'm just kind of leaning backwards almost, but I'm trying to focus on keeping my hips above where my feet are landing on the ground. I've heard the analogy that you want to imagine your legs are pistons where they're just going up and down, and that's just keeping you up off the ground. You know, in actuality, they go up, they go down, and then they pull back, and then they kind of come up in this motion. But keep in mind that, again, the foot's always landing directly below the hips, and that's how you want to be running to prevent these kind of injuries. The next thing I want to talk about is another thing involving your feet, which is your turnover rate. So turnover rate is a phrase we use in running to talk about how quickly your feet are hitting the ground. From what I've gotten from Jack Daniel's running formula, he claims that most runners tend to settle between 180 and 190 steps per minute. So that just is about where people's turnover tends to be at. But I can tell you that if you're going downhill, you want to increase the turnover rate. The benefit to having this faster turnover rate is you're spending less time on any individual foot. So if you are taking these really long steps, as you can imagine, first of all, you're usually landing your foot forward. So you're heel striking. That's what we call this, when your heel lands ahead of your hips. And that's causing more impact and that's slowing you down. But that higher impact is going to put more stress on your ankle and make it more likely to roll. And having a faster turnover rate is going to mean that you're spending less total time on your foot, so it's just less impact on that foot for any individual strike. So let's imagine you roll your ankle. If you're having to wait a full second before your next foot comes onto the ground, you're probably going to put a lot of weight and a lot of stress on that ankle before you stop it. But if your next foot is coming a quarter of a second later, then you're not going to be spending nearly as much time and put nearly as much force on the ankle before your other foot comes in to help stabilize you. It's keeping you from having these little minor rolls turn into these big major rolls by having less force on each impact of the ground. This doesn't mean that you need to have a nice little short stride, while you're going, like you're speed walking. You can still focus on doing speed work and having elongated strides. You just need to make sure that the rate of turnover is higher, especially when you're going downhill. It's funny because I've listened to some of the audio of me and my girlfriend running, and you can hear us running, and then our feet just start going faster as we go down a hill. because we're just trying to get our turnover rate higher, partially because we are moving faster, and partially because we're going down that hill and we want to keep our impact nice and low. And then the last thing I want to talk about technique-wise is what you do with your arms. So a lot of the time we run with our arms kind of at 90 degrees, kind of going in and out, forward, backwards. But what you will see, particularly a lot of professional runners, when they're going down really steep hills, their arms start flying out by their sides. And this flying out motion is giving them a better sense of balance. It's just like spreading your arms out wide when you're balancing on a beam, for example. You're just using those arms to help balance yourself out better. And again, if you have a better sense of balance, you're less likely to lean to one side or the other, and therefore you're less likely to roll an ankle. Just looking at those 3 techniques, make sure you have your hips directly over where your feet are landing. Make sure going downhill, you have a higher rate of turnover, and while you're going down hills, you have these nice wide feet. And those should all help your stability and balance while you're going downhill. So not only will this help with your ankle strength, but hopefully it'll give you a better sense of control while you're descending these hills at these races, and really help you out to make sure that you're running the way you want to run your race. So personally, I rolled my ankle in 3 races. My last one was in spring of 2019. I left that race saying, like, I've had enough. The day afterwards, I went out, I bought those shoes, I bought an ankle brace I was gonna wear. I went online and I looked up ankle strengthening workouts. I did all of those, which are exactly the same ones I've told you about. And I looked up technique by professional trail runners to make sure I understood exactly what kind of technique I should be doing. And I am very proud to say that since that day, I have never had another roll. I'm not gonna guarantee that you will not have another roll if you follow these, but I can say that for me, I've had a drastically reduced rate of injuries, and I've definitely had times where I feel like I would have had an injury had I not taken extra preventative measures where I didn't wind up having it. At the end of the day, if you injure yourself, that's just time that you're gonna have to spend recovering that you could spend training. And that means you're gonna be making less gains, you're making yourself weaker, and you're gonna be able to spend less time racing. And for me, at that Charlotte race, when I had to pull out, not only is it just so painful to do emotionally, but I came to the realization that if I didn't do something about my ankle strength, I was gonna have to quit racing entirely. So that's why I did this, why I got really serious. And I hope that if you're going through the same thing right now, I really hope that this video will help you get back to functioning at an optimal level so you can perform and get what you want out of your racing experience. With all that being said, that's everything I have to say. If you guys have anything else you want to add in the comments, please feel free to check out in the comments. I'm also going to link some videos by professional trail runners talking about some of the technique that I mentioned earlier and some of the ankle workouts, just so you can see some of the places where I got this information from. And with that, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you later.